Hi, this is Richard from AgriFutures, and I'm here with Tony Robinson, who's a biological soil advisor, who's going to share us some advice on improving the nutrient density of food through healthy soils. So welcome, thank you for coming on.
Pleasure.
Can you tell us a little bit about your role and what kind of progressions led to the evolution of that role?
Well, it goes back to the very early 1990s. I ran into health problems with using chemicals, and the fact that I was using more chemicals every year and growing more crops and making less money.
Right, okay.
Woke up to reality that I couldn't continue doing that. So I just went through the whole process of biodynamics, the organic system, looked at soil food web, then looked at nutrient balancing based on Albrecht's model. Then came back to the soil food web through Elaine Ingham's workshops and at that time, and then basically found that, like a lot of people had found, that if you did one, that was only part of the job. So if you did that one, that was part of the job. But hey, why don't we bring soil balancing and biology together? And this is basically what I've done, is brought the two together, and we're still working through the various methods of achieving that. It was one of the most interesting things I read about in Albrecht's work, is that he talked later on in his writings, he talked more and more about biology, or biology more so, and I think they were aware of the bacteria in the soils, but they weren't aware of what effectively I think Elaine Ingham has broadened out, which is a bacteria, fungi, a protozoa, which all interact in your soils. So what effectively I do on a permaculture project working with Gary is that we look at a biological soil test. We look at soil food. The biological soil test will measure some 60 odd parameters of what's in the soil, what's working in the soil, what's locked up in the soil, what your organic matter content in the soil is. So what's holding up some of the interactions. We look at all your trace minerals to make sure that we've got the right amount of trace elements in a balanced form, so that the soil can function. It's not just the soil, it's the soil microbes. Because it's the soil microbes that actually feed the plant.
Okay.
And if you understand the process of how a plant grows, he takes up minerals in the evening, later part of the day, and next day photosynthesizes, sunlight sucks up CO2, produces plant sugars, which are carbohydrates, carbon. Plant, still debate, some people say 60–80% of the sugars are used by the soil, the plant only uses 20%. I like to just so half of it's used by the plant, the other half goes back into the soil. That feeds the soil microbes, whether it's bacteria or your fungi or protozoa. And what we have in a teaspoon of soil is we have millions and millions of microbes working in that soil. And when, so they're all, it's basically an eat and excrete, it's jungle warfare down there. If you've got too much bacteria, then the protozoa wake up and he gets has a good gobble at the bacteria, and when he does that he releases nitrogen into the soil. So we have this whole symbiotic range of the microbes fixing nutrients and making nutrients available for the plant. And then we have the plant absorbing CO2 and makes your plant sugars. When those sugars go back into the soil, the microbes take out what they want, and then they shed carbon. So we're absorbing all that CO2. So this argument about what do we do to fix the CO2 business in the world is effectively grow plants without chemicals. Or grow plants with balanced soil nutrition, so that the plants will absorb more nutrition. More carbon dioxide. Problem. I get carried away. What got me involved in this is, for years and years I've listened to people saying we've got to grow more food, The same token as what I've been reading is that our nutritional value of food has dropped by 50%. And there's English data for that. Rodale University's put some out. Kohler has done a bit of a report on that recently. So it's around. So my thoughts is that if we can not necessarily double the nutritional value of food, but if we can increase the nutritional value of food 20 or 30%, we actually don't need more food on the same bit of land. You then have the whole flow-on effect of better nutrition, and we reduce all the whole raft of health issues that people have faced. And we can get away from pesticide residues in food, which is a big issue at the moment in America. Again, depending on what you read, if you don't want to read. So that's what the whole function, that's what I'm looking at in working with Gary, is that I make sure that the plants that go in a permaculture or in a food forest situation has the proper nutrition. It doesn't matter whether it's citrus or whether it's an apple or a pear or whether it's our berries. The principles are still the same. So we achieve that by looking at your soil, your testing. I then look at soil food web test with Cheryl Prue, and then we look at whether we need to what we need to look at. Most of the time, New Zealand soils, we've got to get our fungal activity up, and a lot of times in New Zealand soils, most of the time we've got the bacteria and the fungi there, but they're not active. So we've got to put the right products in there, the fishes, the seaweeds, the biological inoculants, to help feed those, to recreate a balance in your microbe population.
And does that relate to the earlier point of doing that mineral nutrient test and seeing what minerals or nutrients might be deficient in the soil? Are they part of the amendment as well as what you're trying to do to improve the biology?
Exactly. If you just do the soil balancing, you're doing half the job. Okay, you can stack your soil up with all the right minerals, but hey, where are the microbes to put it into the plant? And you're talking about mycorrhizae, fungi, and all those things. That's the key one. Is the bacteria and the fungi and the protozoa provide the food for the mycorrhizae, fungi then to pull into the plant. And at the same process is what we've got to do is we've got to ensure that the soils are well aerated, the soils themselves are functioning correctly through this process. But if you've got, like I've got in one of my greenhouses, and that's what got me started, is that I couldn't grow a crop in one of my greenhouses, and I'd stuffed it in 20 years. So I still haven't got there yet, because it's just a learning process of what I want to do, how to do it, and also resources.
So you're feeding these soil microbes the nutrients to feed them up and promote the fungal dominated transition of the soil and make sure the soil's aerated, did you say?
Yes.
So it's a bit of a combination between improving their habitat and improving feeding them to kind of encourage their population levels. What other things, like I imagine you can add various foods depending on what is present in the soil or what was deficient, but what about the habitat side of things? Like what could you do to help introduce the aeration or improve the habitat for those microorganisms?
Well, that's a combination of getting the calcium levels right. Calcium is one of the key drivers to the whole process. That feeds your worms, feeds your microbes as well. Calcium is very important. I've done got a draft paper at the moment outlining at least 12 key functions of the value of calcium in the soil. And
what was the connection there? So you're feeding the earthworms, and then that feeds the bacteria.
Well, that's part of the whole process. You see, your earthworms are your bigger animals in your soil that are going to eat, basically, it's going to process your organic matter in the soil, your dead leaves and so forth, and then he's going to tunnel and burrow through the soil and opens it up. His leachate or his worm castings are very rich in nutrients, and this is where that worm farming principle comes in. So when I'm looking at a square of soil by 20 by 20, if I see that with 20 to 30 odd worms in that space like that, then I know we've got some soil that's humming. So worms are part of it, but they all interact, and you need it. And the easiest one, so to feed the worms, you need calcium in the form of lime. Okay, so you need organic matter in the form of whether it's cover crop mulch, or whether it's wood chips, whatever is part of that food supply for your worms. You need to reduce your chemicals, kill them off, reduce their numbers. I've never yet, I've always seen worms in even some pretty hard work market gardens. You can see the odd worm. So what we're doing is we see the reduction in numbers in relation to that in the soil. So I've got myself lost now.
Habitat, we're looking at the habitat. So we're getting those worms humming.
So from a permaculture, so you're looking at worms, you're looking at organic matter, you're looking at cover crops to feed that whole process. You're looking at reducing your chemical inputs. We're looking at using more biological friendly fertilisers as well. So you're getting away from the acid-based fertilisers.
And how's that, you were mentioning before about the plants sending out 50% of their sugars into the soil, and also feeding that. How does that kind of tie into that picture too? What are you adopting any particular practices with those plants to help build up the soil biology as well? Or?
Well, that the whole part of what I've just talked about is that whole part of it.
Okay.
It's not an It's not just the worms. It's not just the microbes. It's you've got to look at what your soil's like to start with, what your structure's like, and then you build and feed on that with all sorts of things. And in some properties we go in with humates. We use fish hydrolysate, which not fish emulsions, hydrolysate, because that gives you all the friendly oils, the omega oils, which is part of that fungal development. We'll use, in some cases you could, if you want to lift up your bacteria, you use sugars, plant sugars, or molasses, or those sorts of things. That comes from a soil food web approach. Seaweeds is another good one to help feed that microbial population in the soil, so that can feed your bacteria. You then look at making your own. You can use protozoa teas for feeding the nitrogen function, and if you make a fresh protozoa tea, that's feeding the protozoa. He gobbles up the bacteria. He uses 1 unit of nitrogen and leaves 5 behind. I think it's 5. It's either 5 or 10, one of the two.
How does that work?
And that other ones he leaves behind is biological soil nitrogen, which the plant then takes up in what we call biological form.
So you like converting the nitrates to form that the plants can absorb by eating the other guys.
So, and then you add to that. So in an intensive operation, you add to that. I start looking at cover crops. Particularly your nitrogen fixing ones. You've got your clovers, you've got your all your bean family, you've got your broad bean or tick bean, which is winter growing. You've got peas, so you've got a whole range of those sorts of plants that are all part of it. Again, functioning on it for a permaculture concept, I also start to look at introducing things like your radishes and daikon radish and so forth, because they all have a place. Radish, for a start, will break up your compacted soils. They'll break up that crust on your soils. Plantains, chicories, deep rooting plants, they'll break up and loosen up down there and pull your minerals up, and you get that whole recycle. Comfrey does the same, nettles do the same. So they all play a part in a short space of time. We're trying to cover a lot of ground. They all play a part integrated into that system.
So this is like a permaculture orchard kind of thing. So I'm visualising in the plants you're describing a bit of a ground cover of a diversity of plants to help provide those roles in the soil. But is it in the context of like an orchard system, or what's your cash crop here?
Well, from an orchard situation, that's the basic principle. For an orchard, yes, and that's what the focus is with Gary's work, is that orchard meadow sort of thing. But you can then start to take that. I'm doing that in my greenhouses now. I've got an old greenhouse which I'm just rebuilding, so I've got a cover crop in there. And I've got 15 species of plants in there to work on that.
So rebuilding the soil.
Rebuilding the soils.
But not with your cash crop in amongst it. It's just kind of like a transition.
Well, that is a cash crop. That's because that will grow. That will do its job by feeding the soil. You carbohydrates, you plant sugars, and then you have this whole mass of organic matter which you then work into the soil. You have things like mustard and radishes which will suppress weed seeds from that sort of thing. You have You have oats and so forth, which are nitrogen fixers. You've got, oats, go back. Oats are P fixers, phosphate fixers.
Yep.
Your legumes are your nitrogen fixers.
Yep.
You have buckwheat as another phosphorus fixer, or releaser, if you could call it that. So it absorbs phosphates in the soils and then releases them and makes them plant available, biologically available, when you put that back into your soil. I now, whenever I put a new crop of ferns in, and I can show you a bit later on, I'll put a line of tick beans or broad beans down the middle, and they will fix the equivalent of 75 kilos of nitrogen per hectare to the soil.
Wow. And that process you're describing, that's taking the atmospheric nitrogen, isn't it, and putting it into the soil? Is that the process?
That's part of the process, because what you're doing, your legume will absorb, and I can't remember how to explain how a legume works now, but you've got nodules on, you have nodulation, okay, and if you're feeding your plant right and you've got good large nodules and nodules that are brightly pink, we know that he's fixing nitrogen within the soil. So yes, 80%, I think it's 80%, 70% of the nitrogen comes from our atmosphere. So if we focus on plants to absorb that, you put it into your soil. So along with your legumes, you're also then working on your nitrogen fixing bacteria. So it's all a symbiotic sort of relationship. And if you take this further afield, I know the focus has been with particularly with Gary is the orchard side of it. I can do it in a greenhouse. If I was in a cropping farmer or a market gardener, if you had a decent enough cash flow, could afford to do it, then I'd be doing the same thing with those soils.
But I was thinking, like, when you described that, like when you were doing it earlier, you're describing the cost of putting all these products into your soil to get production, and then when you mentioned before about what you're doing to improve the conditions in the glasshouse, you're creating yourself a monetary asset there, and they seem to relate. Like you're going to have to pay for that one way or another, like whether it's chemicals or whether it's building the biology. And it just seems like a better approach, doesn't it? Like if you're doing that kind of annual crop system where it's not, you're adding something to the soil because you're taking something out. You're trying to add the biology to the soil rather than add the chemical to the soil. And to get that crop out.
Yes. And some people can do it with cash cropping. If you put the right sort of legume in, you can do it as a cash crop. Grain crops, you don't have to burn it off these days. You can actually, and there's better equipment around nowadays that you can re-drill straight into that, and that's a lot of carbon that's going back into the soil. So cover cropping and mixed cropping, or it's not the right word, is becoming quite big in America now.
So interplanting
thank you,
with different things.
Yes. So if you're putting a cereal crop down, you put a legume in with it. A lot of it they use as clovers over there, or annual clovers. So it's a matter of just finding what will fit in.
And how does that interfere with the harvest of it? Like if that other crop's there?
Well, that's a good question.
Mixed bag, I imagine. It kind of depends.
Well, if you put a clover's basically low growing, and he's in there in the early piece, and he will sit there. So if you're using annual clovers, it's not an issue for cultivating later on. So it's worked into the soils. You've got to be careful how you do it. And I think from that point of view, and there may be issues. I don't know. I haven't actually seen. I haven't seen any issues arise, or stories about the issues of that.
I guess it's just getting the combination right and the technique for harvest, so that, as you say, there's a difference in layer or something.
Exactly. It comes down to that. Yes.
Interesting.
So there would be some species. So you wouldn't put peas in there.
Because they climb up, wouldn't they?
Exactly.
Okay. So can you tell us how was Elaine Ingham's soil biology test that you were mentioning before? So
soil food web test.
Soil food web test. Okay. So if you're doing these amendments to the soil and building up the soil biology, what are you looking for? Like, how do you know that this is getting a good result in your soil biology, and how you know you're on the right track and improving things?
Well, when you get a soil food web test, it comes back and it tells you your total fungi, bacteria, protozoa levels
Okay.
are in the soil.
Yep.
It then tells you how much of it is active, and then you get from Soil Food Web, from Cheryl, you'll get some recommendations. You need to feed your fungi, you need to feed your bacteria, you need to look at your protozoa.
Okay. And is this a service in New Zealand?
Yes, yes, yes,
Oh, okay.
yes,
Who is
yes.
it? Who is it? What do you
Cheryl Prue from Soil Food Web. She
Okay.
she originally started with Elaine Ingham.
Mhm.
Actually, Cheryl and I were trying to work out, was it 15 or 18 years ago? We
Really?
first started
Goes that
together.
far back. Was
Yeah.
the Soil Food Web around that long?
Oh, yes, Soil Food Web, yes it has.
Been
Yes,
around, okay.
yes, because we all started off in those days with actually making live compost tea. And what's happens, that's, so you're making a live product, you brew it up, you know, 18, 20 hour process, and then you've got 6 hours in which to put it onto the soil.
Yep.
So it's a pretty hard, demanding thing. You've then got to look at the whole hygiene issues of your machinery. If anything goes anaerobic, you get films on your brewers and so forth. You know, they will turn the brew anaerobic and not aerobic.
Okay.
So it's quite a complex system of doing. But since then, what has come along is a range of biological inoculants. In other words, they have gone through that compost tea process, whether it's taken 2 or 3 weeks, and at the end of the day, the guys who put it together have worked out a way of making it go to sleep, so that when you add water to it, you then have metabolized inoculant that is your food supply for your soil microbes.
Right. And you can match that up quite precisely with what the Food Web's telling you about what's required.
Well, that's part of that process.
Okay.
A biological inoculant, well, there's a whole range of them out there. Some of them, the ones I like to use, will as the food supply. And the guy, Jeffer Gates, who's now retired from the product that I use, spent a long time developing this, and he was very clever to work out how to produce a food supply that's very similar to what the plant does. Okay, and that's, we don't know what the process is. It's a process, it's a compost tea process, and they put in all the various additives to actually give you, in other words, the food for that microbe. And let's remember that we have probably a billion or millions and millions in a teaspoon, so only a little drop doesn't take much to feed that process, and he starts feeding itself. So the compost tea side of it, and I don't want to knock compost tea, but the compost tea in my mind is the basis of it. And with technology we can go to, there is now a range of products out there, and it's getting wider and wider all the time, where a farmer can go along, instead of picking up his drum of chemical, he can pick up his drum of biologicals. Whether and we call them biological pesticides. So you've got ones that will do insects, you'll do ones that will do fungal activity. So it's
so they're controlling pest insects and pest fungi.
Yes. So within that you'll have a particular bacterium or a particular fungal, beneficial fungi or beneficial bacterium that will actually then control your pest. And we call it pest in general from that point of view. So that works away. So it's a biological approach. It reduces your chemicals. And if you really want to look at why chemicals are so dangerous, read Voisin's work, Chabot's, those are both French. I think they're both French. There's just been a report out recently from a French report about growers can reduce their chemical inputs without actually going backwards. Not the right word, but that'll do. There's another interesting guy to actually read about, and that Graham Sates nutrition rules. He interviews 22 master consultants in this area, and it just gives you a very diverse range of backgrounds. Some of the guys have passed on, but it gives you a whole range of backgrounds, people, different experiences, different parts of the world, different parts of soils, and there's no one. Probably to answer one of your earlier questions, there's no rule that fits one. I'm not describing it right, but you know what I mean, don't you?
There's no one rule fits all kind of thing.
That's the one. Thank you. So
diverse.
So that's where my skill comes, is looking at all the parameters.
Yeah, yeah.
And to add to that parameter is I also can read the weeds, I also know what pests and diseases are telling us, what effect they're having on the plant. In other words, why is he there? Okay. For example, if you have a look at those ferns, there's a bit of scale there. Although no, scale is related to the fact that we have a sulphur issue in the soil, so we're not providing enough sulphur along with the other things. So there's subtle things like that.
So reading those clues and basing your management around that.
Yes, and the weeds are the same thing. I can now walk out onto a farm, bit of tomato here, and walk across a farm and look at that weed, and tell a farmer what I think is some of the issues within the soil. That is then backed up with the tests.
Interesting.
Yeah.
One thing I was wondering with what you were describing earlier with matching the nutrient you put back into the soil to what the plant would provide, and just how that might relate to actually working with the plant so that the plant does it for you. Because it seemed like, and it's something I heard before, like how we try to, add these various nutrients to the soil, but the plant with its relationship with the soil has a far better handle on what that soil biology wants because of the feedback it's giving the plant, and it can provide them better to the soil biology if you just work with the plant and make it healthy. Have you come across anything like that? So, and they were suggesting foliar sprays on the plant of whatever might be lacking, and then the plant is going to decide what best that soil biology needs and work in with it. So you're kind of, instead of trying to pre-guess the plant and what it the soil biology wants, you kind of just trust the plant knows what to do, and you just kind of look after the plant. I don't know, it reminded me of that when you said that.
Yeah, you've hit it on the nail.
Yeah.
The plant will provide for itself, but if it's not there, then the plant won't. Or if it's locked up, then the plant can't get at it. And this is where, see, this is the Albrecht model.
Okay. Yeah.
Professor William Albrecht spent a lifetime. And there's some articles for you actually from him and from Dr. Christine Jones on about soils as background for you. So that's what it is. So his process, what we call the Albrecht model, is what he spent a lifetime working out. What does a plant need to grow without pests and diseases?
Okay. Yep.
And that starts that process. So if you've got balanced soil nutrition, the plant takes it up, and as you said, uses what it wants and puts the rest back into the soil. Yeah, exactly. So when you've got to a balanced situation like that, and the whole system's functioning, you're not needing your artificial fertiliser, you're not needing your chemicals. All you have to replace on that soil is what you take off. All right, and there are figures out there, depending on what crop it is. Okay, so a tonne of wheat will remove X amount of phosphate or potash, etc. So in a sustainable system, you've got to look at what you can replace that with. So that means you will bring in obviously smaller quantities of whatever fertiliser it is. So nutrient, as one should say, whether it's calcium or phosphorus or magnesium, then you put in an amount. Because you're quite right, we have this recycling process going all the time.
So it's a way of being a bit more precise of what nutrients you're adding to the soil by doing a test.
Yes.
And your ultimate game is to improve the health of that plant so it doesn't have pests and diseases, like ourselves. I guess if we're nice and healthy, we're not going to get those either. So kind of, Well, so how do you do? What's the test though? Like, how do you know what it is missing? What is that?
We do a Reams, what we call a Reams Albrecht test. Soil test.
What's that?
It's done at EAL laboratories in Australia, and it gives us 60 different parameters of what's happening. So it measures and it follows right the way through. So that test tells us, the first thing it tells us is the Reams part, which is what's available in the soil for that plant to take up today. Then the rest of it tells us what different levels of all the nutrients in the soil that we need, what levels are they at. So have we got excess potassium or excess magnesium, or have we got enough calcium? Then we look at all your different, I think we do 5 phosphorus tests at varying levels, so that gives us a picture of whether it's telling us how much this phosphorus is locked up, and soils with very high organic matter tie up nitrogen and phosphorus, they tie up a lot of soil nutrients in the soil. So we have a test, that the part of the test tells us what's actually in the storage bin.
Okay, yep. So it's testing the organic matter for what's stored in it.
It's part the whole test tells us how much calcium, magnesium and so forth, and the cations is actually stored.
Okay, yep.
The organic matter tells us, effectively gives us a picture along with cation exchange capacities and other bits and pieces that we read, on whether or not that soil is functioning biologically.
Okay, cool.
Is it releasing those nutrients?
And does that tie back in with what you were saying before about those biological soil amendments? Like, can you then provide them through that context?
Yes.
Or is it, okay.
Yes. So that helps kickstart that process.
Yeah, yeah. Nice.
Yes.
So you got a test there for the nutrients, you got the soil food web for what's happening in the biology, you got the arsenal of biological supplements to kind of feed it, and you're kind of working with that as, you know, as well as a general, I guess, improving the habitat and the you know, biological activity of the soil. And,
yes.
Nice.
And one other thing is a farmer can actually test that on a regular basis themselves by doing Brix testing, sap pH testing, which is what I was doing when you arrived.
Okay, so just a little quick test.
Yeah, you can do your own quick test.
Along.
Yeah.
Okay.
And sometimes they frustrate the shit out of you.
Not quite the result you expect.
I did that for a couple of years and hell, chucked it in the corner, came back a couple of years later.
Oh no.
It can be quite disheartening when you think, oh well, I'm doing it all right, I'm doing it all right. But what I found, the missing part was, quite simply, was that I was just doing the mineralisation part of it.
Right, okay, yep.
Then started to look at the biological part of it. Okay, we need microbes in there to put it into the plant.
Okay.
And if you have a look at, one of the ones I talk about to guys is, look, just think about how our native bushes grow. How do we get 1,000-year-old trees? They don't have NPK fertiliser, they don't have Monsanto drugs to grow. So they have set up their own system. And I've had the chance of doing some soil food web tests, and I've done some soil tests, can't remember. I know soil food web tests, and I've done both, and it's actually quite interesting. Some of our plants don't necessarily follow directly the Albrecht model, but they're fairly close to it.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's what they do. You know. So every plant in this country that we're growing, if you're not filling it up with chemical crap, we're going to soak up CO2. We don't need a fancy machine or a bloody pill or a vaccine to correct all these issues of cows farting and methane and CO2 emissions and all that sort of stuff. Just got to plant more trees. Plants, trees.
I was going to ask about that, you reminded me. So that's the carbon sequestration, isn't it? It's like making use of the ability of plants to draw carbon into the soil as a way to combat climate change, isn't it? And just kind of enhance that process and therefore store more in the soil. And
We're lucky in New Zealand that our soils we haven't lost our topsoils like they have done in Australia and America.
Yeah.
We've still got fairly what we call young soils. Yeah. We've got soils that, although it's rapidly, I think rapidly.
I was going to question that a little bit.
Go down there. You might want to take
I was running with it. It varies. We'll say it varies.
I went on to some soil. Oh, the other day actually working for a guy. Wondered why his truffles weren't growing. And I listened to what he said, and I went out there and I dug a hole, and it didn't take me longer than 2 seconds to tell him.
Yeah, right.
It's all stuffed.
Yeah.
I used a different word than that.
Well,
it was. Yeah, the soil was absolutely stuffed. We went down into a gully on the edge and we dug in the soil. I said, well, that's what your soil should look like if you wanted to grow truffles. In other words, your mycorrhiza's not functioning because the soil is just stuffed. We know why. My suspicion is that the property was intensively cropped a very long time ago.
Probably with chemicals that
it was
killed
chemicals.
all the...
I think it might have been strawberry, so it would have been chemicals, fumigation, you name it.
Well, thank you. Maybe we can have a look around at the plants if you don't mind.
Yes,
Just walk us through, like, and this here, is these some seedlings you've got going here? Is this...
Crop of Miscanthus giganteus. It's a sterile form of elephant grass, and we're growing that basically for this purpose here as an in-house mulching material. It has a 20-year lifespan, and you can basically, I'll chop that off and put it through a shredder, chipper, and it makes a nice coat of mulch material. It has 5 other uses, from everything from shelter on dairy farms, particularly where they've got irrigators. You can use it for bedding, you can use it for firing boilers, you can also, with the right machinery, make it into diesel. So it's a very, very long-term permaculture, it's a sustainable crop that could be, I think, has long-term potential. We
Good
can do
barrier crop too, maybe. Good barrier crop too, maybe.
Oh, barrier, yeah. It'll last 20 years in the ground,
Really?
and you'll get 20 tonne to the hectare. And because it's so light, that is a lot of bulk material.
And you can recrop it every year without
20 years
replanting?
non-stop.
Wow. Okay.
That's what they say, but in my mind, if you do it as intensive as that, then you'd still have to feed it a bit of lime, a bit of potash, because you always, every time you take something like that away, you're removing your potash.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just the diversity of it. It's sterile, so it's not going to seed anywhere, not going to become thing. It becomes an emergency stock food. Yeah, just
Wonder.
so I'll
Elephant grass.
Elephant, that's what they call it. Elephant grass. Kerry Reams developed this refractometer for measuring sugars, and there are certain criteria that you can look at. In other words, if you've got is this one thing is basically we're looking for on an average across your plant spectrum. The Brix over 12 is the basic target for most crops, and that's telling us that we've got a reasonably healthy plant. Okay. What if then there's differences between, there's a fuzzy line which tells us that we've got complex sugars which we want in a plant. If there's a sharp line, it's telling us that we've got simple sugars, in other words not enough calcium in the plant. And things like that. A very low Brix, and then you look at it, a very low Brix can tell you whether you've got whether it's short of cations or anions, or you've got too much hydrogen. Doesn't specify what type. Or whether it's doesn't specify whether it's magnesium or calcium.
Oh, I'm interested. I'm going to look into
However, there are other meters that you can use to support that. Work on the same principle. So what I use here is a refractometer and a SAP pH meter. And basically, I'm trying to. If I've got a SAP pH of over 6 and a Brix of over 12, then I know I've got a relatively healthy, well-grown plant. If they're not matching up, then you look at sometimes it might be telling you you've got insect pressure problems. If it's another way, which I can't quite remember, it's telling you you've got soil fungal problems, and that's broad spectrum on your testing. And not a lot of people actually know how to use it properly. Most people look at it, just look at the refractometer side of it, and just think, oh, I'm over 12. Well, yeah, fine, but okay, if you're over 12, why have you got insect diseases, insect problems?
Okay. So what was the other part that goes with the refractometer?
To me, is a SAP pH meter.
SAP pH meter with the refractometer.
Yes.
Will tell you.
And there is another one if you look into the a conductivity meter. And I don't say much about that for the simple reason is I'm still learning how to use the bloody thing. Now that's trying to understand what it's telling me.
Iron concentration.
Yes. Yes. So they're the basic 3 parts. And if you want to know more about it, go to Hybrix Gardens or go to Pike Labs.
Okay, cool.
Pike Labs would do it. Graham Sates, Nutritech. Yeah, he's another one.
Cool.
Anyway.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, no, this is my crop. This is leather fern, which I sell to the florist trade.
Okay, so this is like dried.
No, it's a fresh cut. I'll show you what been picked this morning.
Okay.
So we harvest this once a week.
Yep.
Through here, and this will go to the florist markets in Wellington and Palmerston North.
Nice.
So it goes to the wholesalers.
And it regrows.
Yep. We grow.
How many regrows?
10 years. 15
Nice.
years.
That's all right. That's good.
Longer.
Cut flower. A 10-year regrowth off a cut flower. That's a good crop.
We're harvesting. What are we harvesting at the moment? 1,500 stems a week out of 2 houses. And I've lost my 2 outside houses because it's just been too wet.
Right.
And we've got a potash deficiency running there because of the wet.
Yeah.
I'll produce off these for, I Oh, I got a bit lazy. I don't bother during the winter. About 8 months of the year now.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a struggle during the winter to keep production
Yeah,
levels up, and I think it's easier just to wait because the crop will grow. And I start again in the springtime at some stage. Yeah.
So in the context of this system and working with the biology and getting things going, because this is how many extractions would you make a year of cuts? You know, how much are you taking out of the system?
Well, as I say, we're picking once a week.
Once a week, so that's a pretty high extraction rate.
It is a high extraction rate.
Input rate as well, or is it?
What I have done is I've run the potash levels down.
Okay.
Something chronic, and the thing is, I started off at the very beginning always with a very low potash on this property and very high phosphates.
Okay, right,
and
right.
that has been quite a battle to try and correct.
Right.
It's been challenging. Immensely challenging at times.
Is that just a particular thing with ferns, or is that
no?
to
This
work
was
with the
a historical problem with how I ran the property when I first started, and that's how we did it. You know? We have a heavy clay soil that hangs on to your phosphates. Depending on what crop I was using, I was growing, I think, Gypsophila, and Gypsophila wanted lots of magnesium, so we poured the dolomite on, so we pushed your excess magnesium in the soil, so that affects all the uptake of all the other things. And when you locked up particularly phosphates and your magnesium and so forth, it's really hard bloody work to start to really get it back in, and then you've got to start to look at what's happening with your iron and zinc and your coppers and what else was something manganese in here. So we're still running a bit of the paleness of the colour. We're still running an iron deficiency because the high phosphate is tying up your iron. So you have these great interactions. But this is the house that 1990 that I couldn't grow a thing in it. This is the house that started me off in doing what I'm doing now. I couldn't grow. Winston's Heritage tomatoes. So whether it's tomato or a plant, but these are nice and juicy, so it's easy to get the sap out. So we just it's all been cleaned. So we just squeeze a bit of the old juice out. Oops. And yeah, so you're going to make a liar of me today. Okay. That's your tomato. I don't know whether you can photograph that, Chris, but yeah, it's sitting on 9, which is not too bad actually, considering it's a cloudy, dull day.
Nice.
Yeah.
But your sap pH is 4.2. I prefer to see him at 6.2.
Can we? Let's try. Too dark today.
You could have just made up the value. No one would have known.
Well,
would have been reading
come on,
it.
that's well, at least you can show the thing, can't you?
Yeah, that's
so
right.
that's
We've seen you use it.
So which actually it's on a par with what I measured at lunchtime.
Yeah.
So there's a whole raft of things. I think in some ways there are a lot of things that you can read from bricks. It can tell you if there's a storm coming off, there hasn't been a storm, and it's quite a complex thing. And unfortunately, the information is not clear when you get the tools and stuff, and no one's really put it all together. I read extensively, so I get a bit of info here and a bit there, and I have been.
Okay.
It's been quite hard to get a lot of information about how to read a refractometer and what it's telling you.
Okay. So the refractometer is this one here.
That's
the bricks test.
That's the sap.
pH.
That's your sap pH.
Okay. Yeah.
That's your refractometer.
Okay.
And you've got calcium, nitrogen meters. You've also got a whole range of things. But if that was sitting at 6 to 6.4, then pH, that means then we've got balanced. We've got enough calcium in the system, so it's balanced.
Yep.
And that would then should mean that the bricks would be running for tomatoes in the same.
Okay. And the relationship is if the soil's a certain pH, plants are more able to absorb certain minerals And if it's not, you know, they're not, and then it should be more ideally around 7, shouldn't it, for most plants?
6.2 to 6.4.
Okay, and at that range they can absorb most.
If you go to 7, you're in a neutral situation, which means you don't have enough hydrogen ions in there.
Yep, yep.
And we do need a certain amount of hydrogen in the system for the acidity to help the process work.
Okay.
The biggest, freshest move at the moment is there's a big emphasis on, out of America, is on permaculture, crop diversity,
Yep, yep.
cover cropping. Because the whole system's a cropping system over in America, basically. It's a cropping system. You know, you grow your grains and wheat and stuff, and it trundles off down the road to the CAFOs, as they call them.
Yep.
So what people are now finding is that they need that diversity within that, and they're the people that are making the changes and the moves and so forth. And that's the big. I see that. Well, that's what I'm reading as the emphasis on change now. We unfortunately haven't caught up with that.
We're at the tail end of it.
Well,
what do you see the advantages? What's the strength in New Zealand? Like, what kind of strengths can we leverage here to? Because we've got certain opportunities, don't we?
We produce 1% of the world's food supply. It's not hard to go clean and green, not organic, go clean, green, nutrient-dense food. It'd still be, you don't have to be, and I've got to be careful here because I know the organic guys don't like it, but unless an organic farm is running biologically, it's not doing its job properly. You know, the stats, the figures that come out say that, well, basically, to my mind, all organic food is just basically spray-free or chemical-free.
Or a different type of chemical.
Well, yeah, and you have a look at some of those old ancient chemicals or things that they use. I never use them. Copper sulfate is a heavy metal. Lime sulfur is incredibly dangerous to use.
Yep. I mean,
from a person point of view, and it kills everything.
Nature's full of very organic, dangerous chemicals, that's for sure.
Potassium chloride, because it's mined in a lake, it's natural. Well, bloody, you know what chlorine does to a swimming pool? Kills the bugs. So I could go on and on and on ages for that.
Cyanide's natural. I mean, cyanide's another organic one, isn't it? There's plenty of toxic ones.
So New Zealand itself could actually, it wouldn't be that difficult to. Well, effectively, there's a lot more people who've gone beyond organics, and there's a big emphasis on nutrient-dense food. We don't have to grow, as I said earlier, I don't know whether we caught it, but we don't have to grow more food in this world. Let's increase the nutrition of that food for at least 50% of the people. Can we do it cheaper? There is an extra cost in it, but long-term down the track, I think there are savings. But at the same token is that those of us on the land have to be rewarded better than we are now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a disjoint, isn't there, in the cost the consumer buys. You know, there's a cost in having this low cost food that is borne by the environment rather than the consumer, and if you want to produce a product without that environmental cost and sell it at a higher cost, you're kind of putting off the consumer, and there's this whole disjoint, isn't there?
Yeah, well, you're going to lose 50% of your customers.
Yeah.
But okay, as I say to people, this is what, all right, there's two things. You know, you either die of chemical poisoning, or you can't afford to buy the good food. Or the third alternative is the supermarkets will ring up South America or in China and say, I want 10 containers worth of cabbages each week, please. Thank you very much. We've got absolutely no control over our food.